Welcome back to the latest episode of the Real Tech Talk podcast. Today, brand new, we are talking to my boy, Adam Stark. Adam Stark is solving a problem that we have dealt with in this industry forever. But before we get into that, even more interesting, his cousin, Tony Stark, the Iron Man, not coming through today, so hold your horses. But I can't wait to hear what my boy Adam is talking about. Stay tuned, watch it, hit it, like it, plug it. In addition, we got our first sponsor. I was telling you guys, people are knocking down the door on sponsorship right now. Where are all the banks? Where are all the consultants trying to get to this marketplace? I got them. They're coming in every week. Reach out to me if you're interested in getting in front of these guys. Welcome back to the Real Tech Talk podcast with E Breezy.
That's why we're here, bro. This is Real Tech Talk. Boom shakalaka. So who the hell are you, bro? What are you into? What do you do? Dude, you can keep it real here. Tell me about these real estate players.
Eric Brody is the managing principal of CEMVC LLC. All opinions expressed by Eric and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of CEMVC LLC. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of CEMVC LLC may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Welcome back to the latest episode of Real Tech Talk podcast. Now, before we start, I want to tell you, I started this whole venture shenanigans in the podcast because I said, I want to look at technologies that make me a better builder, developer, manager, and the way you live in my assets. And today, my guest does just that. So this is a technology near and dear to my heart. Also, what I find fascinating about it is he has a cousin that's very, very famous. You may know him as Iron Man, Tony Stark. Today, I am lucky enough to have Adam Stark of Jet.Build. So everyone, please clap it up for Jet.Build. Crowd. Adam, thank you so much for coming through. Look, I know a bunch about this man, but I want him to tell a little bit about himself, how he got into this tech business, and first and foremost, thank you for coming through, man. You don't have to do this, so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that the celebrity status just got thrown onto me, but actually, I feel like I'm in the presence of a celebrity.
For the 1,500 to 2,000 people watching us, yes,
this is going to be huge, and I can't wait for it to be huge. Yeah.
I'd also like to say another one of our guests who did not come branded. Where is like the Jet.Build tats, bro? Where is the Jet.Build T-shirt? Where is the gear?
Yeah, you invited me in winter. I'm
you know what? I also, before we get started, I keep forgetting we are now sponsored. I have a sponsor. It's called Annex Ventures. It's our first sponsor. And I want you to know, people have been banging down the doors to sponsor this podcast because of guys like you. So if you're interested in sponsoring, let us know. I mean, I'm sifting through it. I don't know if we're actually going to choose them. But, we'll see, so make sure you reach out because Jet.Build and Annex and Real Tech Talk would love your sponsorship. Back to why we're here. So we're here with my boy, Adam Stark. Adam Stark, welcome. Thank you, as we were saying. Now, tell me a little bit about how you got into tech, right? Because that wasn't the original position. And then how you got into Jet.Build specifically, and then what problem it's solving. So hit it up. Let the audience know the deal.
Absolutely. So I love the founder story for Jet.Build. So myself and my co-founder, Joseph, we both grew up as enemies, essentially. We played against each other in high school sports.
What sport?
Soccer, mainly. Then fast forward a bunch of years, we both end up in the Israeli military in the same enlistment. In the airborne division, so paratroopers. Again, fast forward a bunch of years.
Wait, can we stop for a second? Yeah. Isn't that like special forces?
So yeah, I served in special forces.
So
unit.
Am I in the presence of an absolute stone cold killer? Because you know how much I love that kind of shit, dude. That's my shit. The streets of Brooklyn weren't that hard. This is the real deal, people.
But I can't rap like you though. So
I know.
So
before we get into it, how many moves until you would have cut my head off?
Well, you know the saying.
Chop me up into little pieces.
You know the saying, right? I feel I don't have to say it even.
Oh, I like that. Man, God damn it. Where was I? I was not in the military. Damn. I was over here putzing around on the streets of Brooklyn. Well, no, that's dope. All right, so go on. So you met with your business partner, but it wasn't, you guys were just we're just homeboys now, I guess, right?
Correct. Yeah. So fast forwarding from military service, both end up in New York City working for real estate developers, similar development firms.
Why development
positions. So speaking for myself, I loved the aspect of designing, the aspect of building something that's tangible, and then just the aspect of getting shit done.
Right.
So I felt that
that's
all over.
the main premise of real estate development. People are always like, what's the secret sauce? Like, can you execute goals, right?
Exactly.
All right, fresh.
So finishing undergrad, had a good opportunity in
Where'd you go to
real estate
school?
development, Northeastern for undergrad.
Boston.
And,
right?
in Boston, exactly, then later on NYU for an MBA.
He's smart too, guys. You got to throw in that MBA. Look, it's not MIT and Harvard, but still, it's something.
So in that experience in real estate, myself and Joseph, we have a combined 15 years and $1 billion in construction managed. So during that experience, and I think
was it developer builder that you went to work for?
Developer builder, yeah, correct. And in that experience, I think something that almost everyone can relate to. So if you're someone who's remodeled your bathroom, or if you're someone who's built a 70-floor, high rise, you understand that you should have, or you felt, friction as it relates to your budget and as it relates to your schedule, right? Why should that be?
I know. I have a TV show on it with The Real Deal, all about like the friction and like trying to tell the people like how frustrating it could possibly be to like sort of shed light that it shouldn't be that frustrating. So you found that like no shit, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So we were the people, we were the client, right? We were the people that understood, trying to manage multiple companies and multiple teams within those companies in this process.
And you're saying each company is a project, right? Exactly, is that like, so like you're just, it's funny because in the accounting process of it, which most people don't understand, there's a specific code section for construction and you look at it as a WIP report, like work in progress. Like so multiple projects you're saying at the same time, each one is its own entity.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And in that process, we don't have a tool to manage the flow, right? And when I say flow, that's everything from, like you touched on, right? The accounting aspect of it, the operations aspect of it, the progress, right? Reporting.
So what did you do? Well, how did it work?
So, similar to what is industry standard, essentially, right?
What's industry standard?
Over budget, over schedule. It's messing up and then reacting after the fact, right?
By the way, I came up with a saying for it. You want to hear it?
Yeah, I do want to hear it. Absolutely.
So everyone's like, you're raising all this capital for development. You're supposed to be like precise. And it's funny, coming from the military, there's like something they call genius by this guy, Karl von Clausewitz, this Prussian general, who was like, basically wrote this thick book like this. And at the end of it, he goes, and those who are successful, we don't really know why. They're just super like intuitive and smart, right? So everyone comes to me and says, so what's your motto on development and construction? And I'm like, reasonableness and adaptability. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah. We don't know how exactly we're going to get there. I know what the drawings say. I know what the cost is. But the general or the leader in that is ducking and weaving to get to that goal. It's not a precise like science, right? It's the art of building and developing.
Right. So to kind of, level with people's understanding in just in general, right? I like to kind of compare it to whether it's an Excel, having the Excel as
So Excel was
platform,
one way you were managing,
right? But now going to like how one would imagine an accounting department, right? You wouldn't allow your accounting department to function without Excel. You wouldn't allow them to function without a QuickBooks or NetSuite, for example.
Sure.
So why are we allowing our contracting teams or developers to operate these complex projects, right? To create, as you say, right? To create a physical, tangible thing from paper without a solution, without a product, right?
So what you're saying right now, people would be shocked to know that construction and development is being managed with paper, email, and like, what would you call that, 2007 technology? Like, I don't know. I don't even remember when I got my first email. You're the young man.
I call it Windows 95.
Windows 95 tech. So they'd be shocked to know that right now, certain firms are probably starting to understand what you're stating, but they would be shocked to know that probably the majority is some Excel, email, an accounting module on the side, but no centralized or no way that we're all looking at the same thing, basically.
Correct. And keep in mind, even if you have like Excel, for example, or organized files on your end, now you're trying to share it across different companies who might, by the way, be using different products, right? So let's say you're using SharePoint, right? Microsoft SharePoint as your file storage. Now your contractor's using Dropbox. How are you collaborating?
Or
there?
what about that? They had that for that hot minute. An architect had me on this FTTP site where like every time you logged in, it was a problem, you know, like you just couldn't figure it out. It was like, you know, I couldn't, it looked like it was like code. Like I had to understand code in order to operate it.
Right. And now to take it even a step further, right? We talked about accounting departments as an example. I think that's something people could generally relate to. So these are departments that are sitting in an office, right? They could just walk over to another desk or pick up a phone,
right,
resolve something. We're talking about in construction development, we're talking about, again, building buildings, right? Tangible things from paper and from office to site. So the level of collaboration is infinitely more than your typical, department inside of a business.
And it's not even departments. Some are other business. Like you're like a company, but you've got 40 subcontractors, 50 subs, architects, mechanical engineers, structural, geotech, all these different players, all using different ish in order to build that building.
Right. And
it's still a paper business.
It's still a paper business. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many...
wonder why anything gets built. Huh?
It's wild. It's wild to think of, and honestly, I laugh at it because it's so crazy that it's laughable, right? There's so many angles to look at as it relates to where process could be improved, where efficiency could be improved. And we're starting that element of change. We're starting that element of understanding, and we haven't even touched on data, right? We haven't even touched on the conversation or the thought process of where is all of that data going? It's going nowhere right now.
Right. So the problem that you basically identified was like, this is ridiculous, right? This inefficiency, this siloed based way of, operating and getting information, right? And all this stuff, by the way, just as an example to our audience, is like there could be a change from an architect. We call them a sketch, quick SK, right? But it doesn't get to a bulletin, which is a way in which you're actually going to put it on a document to give it to, let's say, the general contractor to review, let alone the subcontractor has to do it. So by the time that actually gets through, whatever was supposed to be changed could already be done, right? Just based on time, just that it's slow, right? So like you identified this problem. So then what?
So we have a ton of simple solutions to all of the processes in construction. We'll use the drawings, for example. When you as an architect or you as a contractor, subcontractor submit a question, for example, through Jet.Build product, you have
no. What I'm saying is you as a young man, you're in the fucking development and construction biz. Pre-jet, right?
Okay,
we're getting there. So now it's, all right, you're like, all right, this is whack. Right.
Yeah,
what I think is interesting and what I think that our audience needs to know is what's the typical thing that a guy in our business or person in our business says, right? Say the same shit. I've been doing this for 35 years, right? When you're like, maybe there should be change. They all say the same thing. I've been doing this for 35 years. So you hadn't been, right? So you looked at it differently, right? So you identified that. So then what? Who was the tech, how did you do it?
So what I was doing is phone calls, text messages, emails, an attempt on my own end to kind of document everything, whether it was an Excel sheet or literally just hand notes. Again, with the complexities that exist, really just impossible to track everything, right? You could say Excel, I would say I'm generally speaking tech savvy, right? I'm not a coder, but I am tech savvy. I was not able to kind of manage a project in an efficient way with Excel, right? It's not for the industry. With that being said, and I laugh at this because I think it is laughable. When I left the company I was working for, when Joseph, my co-founder, left the company he was working for, all of that information was tied to our personal cell phones, right? Right? Or, notebooks or whatever scraps that existed or literal physical plans.
So there's no project file.
Right. No project file, no way to track, in hindsight, historical, no way to effectively leverage change management.
And this is big deals. Our audience needs to understand you were building big buildings.
Correct.
With this issue. This is, from the developer perspective.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So then what did you develop? So that's the problem. I agree with you, by the way. I agree. It's crazy.
So here's the problem. Joseph, my co-founder, technical founder, understands how to code. And, we said, screw this. This process is crazy. Both of us cannot, mentally allow for such disorganization, went ahead and start building the beta product of Jet. This is back in 2018 on the side as a side hustle. Moving forward,
Which is what? That's Bezos in the garage.
Exactly,
Let's go big, people.
exactly.
So you said, I'm going to code for a what? What'd you say? It was a workflow? Or how did you, how did you think about it?
So we kind of took what I'll call the basis of operation flow. So you mentioned, the plan, markups, for example. So we took RFIs and submittals as kind of the core of the project. I see that as allowing for process to
just so our audience knows. So
right?
an RFI is an acronym for request for information. It's the way in which your contractors in the field request information from the design professionals. Because lower my hole, you would think that the drawings are perfect. They're human. They never are. Right. So it's a request for information. Then the submittal, right, is actually submitting, this is how I'm solving your two-dimensional image in the real world. So I'm submitting either a specification, I'm submitting a data sheet or materials that I'm going to use, and I'm asking the architect or engineers, is this what they thought was supposed to be there? Just so everyone kind of understands. And this is the documentation flow to make sure there's always a record of what somebody did.
Yeah. Thank you for elaborating.
Sure. That's my job, man.
Exactly. So we saw that as the opportunity to start, right? Mm-hmm. It was an easy way to kind of code what you mentioned already, a workflow, right? To say, all right, RFI or submittal was questioned or marked up on X date and time. Next person in the process is for the architect and engineer to review. Beyond that, if it's going to change anything in schedule or budget, the developer needs to be aware of that. And there's your general, typical workflow that we were working off of, a means of tracking what is going on in the project to allow for the balance of items to proceed.
And I guess now it's cloud-based, like you're stating, right? So and that, by the way, that technology probably wasn't there in 06, 07, right? Which is why we said the FTTP sites, right?
Windows 95, right?
Windows 90, sorry.
Whenever that was.
Windows 95. I'm like Commodore 64 player. So now, you create this, you start to code it, right? But where did that go? Did you realize that there was such a market demand for that? Or, how did you know that you were on the right track?
For sure, yeah. So, first of all, to recognize that we essentially were just leveraging it internally, right?
Yeah.
We found a use case for ourselves in beginning to code a solution. As we continue to develop the product and add different features, I'll call it low-key scheduling features, beginnings of, Gantt chart ability, low-key budget, capacity, ability to store files, right? So to have that centralized data, essentially.
So these are each like modules, right? Because like you're saying, what the audience may understand is we create a schedule. Mm-hmm. I create a schedule before I ever put a shovel in the ground, right? But the reality is it's a complex business where everything's changing constantly. That schedule is BS. Just FYI, so the audience can't understand. You look at a schedule and you say, this is kind of how we're supposed to get there. And then, life happens and it's all over the place. Yeah. But you look back each time at the schedule, each 30 days and say what went right and what went wrong to try to react to moving forward. So you created a schedule module. Mm-hmm. You created an economic one, right? Because we always like to explain, it's like construction is an invoice, right? People are invoicing in the simplest, we call it a requisition, but it's like each month they're invoicing a little bit of their total project cost as they do it. So you did that as well. So you had an economic one, you have a schedule one, you have a flow of information one. What else?
I'll call the submittals and RFI that we touched on, I'll call that the operations, and then essentially just file storage and sharing. So to kind of replace the issue that we were experiencing between, SharePoint, Dropbox, files being too large for email. So those were kind of these like 4 modules that we built off of. And, today to kind of put some, categories to those, it's accounting, collaboration, construction, and data reporting.
I think it's something that's super important. And I feel like the audience may be interested is the idea of like cloud-based computing and construction, wasn't there, right? They were doing it in tons of other industries. Mm-hmm. It took us a long time to be like, don't you want your information in one location, right? So here are my questions. So I understand. All right. And I want to know how you're doing in the rest of it. My question to you is, if everyone is now looking at it, how did you deal with the issue that contractors are laggards? How do you get them to understand just what it is, the product that you're creating?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that, and I'm kind of proud to say this, right, is upfront when we started with the beta, definitely more difficult because it wasn't a refined product, right? We were building something on the side as a side hustle, mind you, as well, right? Today, it's so easy to use, meaning if a contractor, if a person is using a cell phone, is creating a proposal on their computer, using Jet is easier. Why is it easier? Because it has a template for all of the things that you need, all of the functions that you're already anyways doing in a different way, in a scattered, inorganized way. And now you have a platform to just assist you through that process.
I think also, just so the audience knows, literally I went to construction school and one of the classes is like make your own submittal, right? Like literally,
Right.
what do you want to see on it? So you're like just saying, I could literally just standardize it and put it on. And I'm telling you, like people are probably like, what? You're like, that is an innovation, right? Sometimes being like, people think it's like you've changed the world. How about just doing like what's most efficient and then in a central location is changing the world? Right?
Exactly.
So then, so now you create this product, but again, how was the translation? You're saying it was so intuitive, so all you really needed was to show people how it was working, and all of a sudden you started picking up traction on it?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, well, I'll say yes and no, right? So in the beginning, I'll say called 2019 or so, we had a nice product that was ready to explore with external parties. So we onboarded a design client through our network, so a New York-based developer as well. So they started using our product to kind of test it and leverage it for their own case. With them, we built for I'll call it the next year from 2019. So until 2020, we refined it further. We built more features based on their feedback, based on our own, feedback and use cases. And then we, as an end result, came to the product that it is today. That, I mean, granted, we are always refining and always adding.
Yeah, software business is a constant refinement.
Right, correct. But around 2020, mid 2020 or so, really a refined product that, to answer your question, yeah, you go on it, you see the word submittals, it walks you through the process of how to upload a submittal, what information would be relevant. Boom, you're done. Scheduling. Wildly easy to create a Gantt chart schedule with dependencies. If you have changes to it, wildly easy to just create those changes.
So for the more sophisticated people that are watching, there are competitors in the space, right? And I believe that those competitors have been valued, valued very high, right? And you're breaking in now. So what was the difference between you and sort of some of these competitors that are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, myself and Joseph, actually tried to onboard at the time. So pre-Jet at the time,
right? Because you're a young man, technology. You knew like if there's a product, let's try.
Exactly. Yeah. And we came across a few frictions, right? One being price point. Price point was wildly high.
Well, they were the only one, right? They had a monopoly, basically.
Well, yeah, I'll call it basically. I believe that other legacy platforms also existed, as they do still today. And I'll touch on the other friction points, which ties those together, which is the platform itself, right? We spoke about user adoption as it relates to people that are not necessarily tech savvy. I couldn't understand those products, right? I look at those products and I don't know what to do or where to go on the platform itself.
The architect, which I find, by the way, super fascinating. People probably think, oh, the technology exists, they must be the winner. The reality is when the architecture, like how you've actually designed it, is it intuitive? You can win. Like literally just making it the user experience, which now people are understanding is so important because you see these apps, or I always like to compare it to banking apps. There's some banking apps that you're like, I'm switching banks because this is just dope. This is simple. It's easy. There's other ones that have been banks forever, but they're not willing to change. So the idea that just the architecture of the way that you use it could be a winner, right?
Yeah, that's a great comparison with banking apps. Yeah, exactly. So just the architecture, right? So it's kind of that classic, some companies were first to market and then the other company, i.e. Jet, understood the I guess lack of features or lack of UI UX experience, user interface and user experience that existed.
Is that what UX is? User experience? All right, I was making sure. You're talking to old school contractor guy here. Okay, so now, what were the other things that were so different? All right, so I got the architecture. You said price point was ridiculous. I don't know how they're pricing it, but like, okay, you need people to use it.
Right. So in addition, I want to tag something to the price point where these other companies will typically ask for your financial information to create a percentage off of your books to price the product. So that was also a friction point that we weren't able to use their product, right? Onboard their product with our companies that we're working for.
So let me give my audience an example. This
Yeah.
is my genius. So back in the day, every time I retain an architect, right? My father was an architect. You go to the architect, right? You go, here's 50,000 square foot building, 100,000 square foot building. How would you like to price it, right? And the architects I always use were like, oh, that's great. The amount of work it will be X, Y, Z. You know, the amount of staff I need, and they're pricing your project, right? The other architects, the architects that you were like, and they could never prove it, like why you would make more money or not, would say, well, what do you think the hard costs are? And you're like, what do you matter what the hard costs are? And hard costs meaning construction costs. They're like, well, is it going to be 20 million or is it going to be 10 million? You're like, I don't know. I need the design first. They'd be like, well, we're going to charge you based on your hard costs. And I always felt like that was a conflict of interest. Like, what do you mean? What about if I spend more, I spend less? Like, why would your value be pegged to the hard cost, which is what you're saying is the way in which these, like, it never even made sense to me. I'd never work with them, right? It's like, no, I want you to look at your job and what, for your love and for you to get it done, what you would want to charge. What does that have to do with how much I spent?
Right.
So I agree with you. I don't even think I could ever call, I wouldn't even speak to that company is my point.
I agree. I couldn't understand it myself. So, you know, with all those elements, all those friction points that existed, we said, you know, screw it. This isn't going to work. The companies that we proposed it to that we were working for at the time also said, no way, get out of here. And, you know, here we are now with Jet.
So how is it going? Tell us, like, in the marketplace, what's the deal?
Yeah, absolutely.
How much have you raised? If you want to shout out any of the people that gave you capital, and like, where are you at today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we did very, very recently did a pre-seed round. We leading with Shadow Ventures, as our VC, guys in Atlanta.
Atlanta. Nice.
Atlanta. Amazing team, amazingly supportive. We also have Annex on board. Super happy about that. What we're doing in the market right now is kind of creating awareness, creating growth, onboarding more clients. Been an amazing experience speaking to these larger enterprise companies, so companies that are doing, you know, global 50 billion in construction value, who have dedicated innovation arms to their companies, and they're looking for products like Jet to implement through their business.
And have
units.
you locked any of those up where they're doing projects over either multiple states or just multiple projects?
So we're in the sales cycle. I mean, this is all very, very new, right? So
don't worry, this isn't coming out for like 6 weeks. So at that point, you probably locked them all up.
So exactly, yeah. Hopefully by then, yeah. So I mean, for context, Joseph and I jumped on full time in July.
Oh wow!
And started these conversations with the firms that I just referenced. I don't know, in the past month or so.
And they have that beef with those old companies, right?
And they're like major beef. It's always I mean, for me, I think it's funny. It's funny feedback to hear from them, the aggravations that they have with these legacy companies and the inflexibility that those companies have as a solution for these, you know, enterprise global firms.
So right now you're in talks in this sales cycle to lock up some of these larger firms, and you're talking about being full-time since July, and it's October.
Correct.
Like, it sounds to me like the market is starving right now for what you're providing, which is really cool. All right. So where are you guys located? What's your story? Where are you guys at?
New York City based. But we, you know, being a software company, have access to, you know, everywhere in the world, global. And you
got that international flavor. You were out in the Middle East for a while. So, you know, you'll travel anywhere.
Exactly.
You know, so I have a question for you. My biggest issue back in the day with a lot of the companies that were looking at solving for what you are, because I want the audience to know, it was all server based, right? Like, I think a lot of people don't understand technology, just in order to do what you're doing, is changing so fast, which gave you the capability of sort of being able to do this cloud-based system where you can actually all log in from everywhere. One of the biggest things I always thought was, though, what information are you learning, and how are you or what are you thinking about when it comes to aggregating data? So all these guys are now using you. Are you looking to also provide some, like, you know, intelligence back to your client base?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of two ways that I consider it to look at. One is immediately up front, the ability to have the data insight reporting. So today we have workforce reporting, budget reporting, RFI and submittal snapshot, right? So to understand where your project stands in that regard, and change order reporting. So with those 4 data insight reports, you could really quickly and easily at any moment understand kind of a general, you know, kind of macro level of where your project sits. Soon, once we have more data on the product, on the platform, we'll be able to do a few things. One is kind of market commodity rates, right? So we'll be able to understand, if you're building in the New York area and you have X amount of steel, it should cost you X per, whatever metric that you want. If you have,
so you're going to start providing that though. What do they call that? Business intelligence, right? You're going to start to. Are you thinking doing it in AI, or you're going to just have data hackers and data scientists in house looking at it?
Right. So because Joseph is a technical founder, the word AI upsets those in the technical space.
What do they say? Deep learning?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so
augmented reality. Right. Tell me. I don't want to piss. I don't want to be pissing off the smart guys.
So like he'll say, Joseph will say like AI is a plane understanding how to fly itself, not producing kind of data information. But whatever, neither here nor there.
No, I love that shit. That's super important. You got to tell me, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. I do it all the time.
Yeah, no worries. So basically what we will do though with data as we continue to gather more is kind of create automations in a sense, and also create more proactive learnings. So the ability to kind of understand something as it's occurring, and the ability to react like in real time, right? Rather than a reactive in hindsight change to your process.
That's dope, by the way. And I'll give my conclusion about my feelings on it. But there's something I always like to ask my technologists, because I'm always super impressed by them, right? This young man, special ops, now he's working in technology, got into development. How do you balance that out, right? This is like, we say that we're investing in people, right? At the end of the day, it's like if there's a problem and they break down, even if they have the dopest like company about it, they fall apart. So what do you do to balance out your life when you have all of these things, especially, high octane type of personality that we could understand creates that balance for you? So how do you balance out your life in dealing with all this?
I mean, I think what's interesting in that question, specifically for me and also for Joseph, is that both of us are coming from military backgrounds. So when you say what's high octane and what's balance, is we experienced the extreme of reality, I'll call it, right? So the stress moments were being shot at, or wartime zone. So not so much business. With that being said, that obviously doesn't mean business doesn't.
Although, by the way, you could have tons of PTSD, right? I mean, so like you have to find some kind of balance from that. Correct. So you did the extreme. So what do you do today? And it must be a daily type of thing, Yeah,
absolutely. So kind of the point of saying that was in experiencing the extreme and being able to take from that learnings and understand, now understanding the breadth of balance, the range of balance. I think it helps me and helps Joseph kind of create balance in our lives. For me personally, routine is every morning. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours of wellness, I'll call it, right? So everything
self-care.
Yeah, self-care. There's kind of no end to that though. I would advocate for, middle of the day, 15-minute break, at night before you go to bed, 15 plus minutes of wellness, self-care as well. And for me, that's the solution.
Listen to me, like, that's my shit. You know what I'm saying? With all, and it's funny, Joe Rogan, and I'm quoting Joe Rogan, not that he's going to hear this. He always said, like, the worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you. So people may say, oh, but I wasn't in this extreme situation. It's like, whatever your extreme situation was, right? But self-care, right? You're like, what's the basis for it? You'd have me hook, line, and sinker. I'd be like, oh, self-care, this dude's dope, So I totally understand that. By the way, I think just important people to know, it's deep for you, real deep, that you even wrote a book on it, right? So like, by the way, we were talking about before the podcast, his little like side thing was, hey, I'm going to write this book and publish it about self-care. So people can go out there and kind of look at that, so like it's pretty wild. And if we're investing in people, right? Like here's like a high functioning character who I know like business is not going to be something that throws you off. You're like, I'm not, overseas in the military. I'm chilling, So I get that. That's pretty dope. What about for your partner? Is he still just playing a lot of soccer? Is that his shit? Or is he also, did he read the book?
Yeah, he's nice. He's also, first of all, I appreciate that call out. Thank you. Yeah. He's also on the self-care game. He dives more into running.
What is that? What do they get? The endorphins for that, right? Every time I run, I'm like a Clydesdale. I can't run that long. I try my best, but
That's all right. Yeah, that's all right. There's other.
we actually were talking about that. We were like, as a smaller guy, you're like, yeah, but I go a lot further with a lot more weight. I'm like, yeah, I'd make it like 2 minutes, burn out. There's not enough energy in the universe to keep me going that long.
That's all right. You found your other solution though.
100%.
Yeah.
So listen, I think it's important for everyone to know where can they find you and where can they hear about you and where can they learn about you.
Absolutely. So Jet.Build, that's literally our website.
Not Jet.Build. It's Jet.Build.
Exactly.
So the domain is build.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fresh.
Yeah.
That's going to be the new thing, by the way. Everyone else keeps renaming words in technology. You're like, no, it's spelled Jet.Build, but Jet.Build.
Right. Yeah. You got to find your industry and create that as your domain.
That's awesome.
That's what we did.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Jet.Build, that's literally the domain.
What about social, linked?
Yeah, so we got LinkedIn, also Jet.Build is there. And in terms of other social accounts, we're starting to kind of build out. We're starting to ramp up on the marketing and advertising side.
Very fresh. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming through, telling us clearly and concisely what the deal is. To me, this is near and dear to my heart. People better pay attention because construction is slowing down. And in order to have to have workflows that are actually working where people are actually seeing it, I bet you're going to immediately see an ROI. Like you're going to know what the deal is on your project. So I think it's something to watch for sure.
Absolutely.
But I do appreciate you coming through. Tell your cousin, Iron Man, I say what's up. And we'll talk soon. All right, brother?
Thanks, Eric.
You
Appreciate
got it. Of course. That was an absolutely fascinating podcast for me. I've been seeing out in this industry, like it needed to be disrupted so many years ago, right? But like, I think it's what's really important is technology has just started to catch up for the ability of what he's doing. Other industries understood it. Other industries got it done. Just think of the idea of like Facebook and Instagram where we all can communicate. We were not doing that in construction. Then the idea which came up, right? So now someone else had a solution. I was talking about the competition, but the competition as a model that doesn't make any sense to me. Why should you be in my pocket about what the cost is if the amount of information and storage and the ability for it to transfer is really what the value is? So I was always so frustrated with who the competition was out there. And for him, he's saying, look, I'm going to make it more intuitive. I'm going to make it easier to use. And I'm not going to look at how much you're making in order to understand. To me, he's definitely going to disrupt that business. This is definitely a technology that I'm testing and want to put my money where my big mouth is. And this is definitely a technology, if we look at what my thesis is, doesn't make me a better builder, developer, manager, the way you live in my assets. Hands down, this does it. So I'm definitely trying to get down with Jet.Build. I'm definitely going to watch them as they pick up these projects. And I guarantee you hear about them coming up in the next few months that they are changing this game. So let's watch out for Jet.Build. And I really appreciate them for coming on and take a look at their site. And in conclusion, this is definitely one that I'm down with. So it gets the E-Breezy seal of approval.